getting her picked up tonight.
I didn't know. I forgot that you know these were in the matter. I didn't know who's got. Hey, don't talk to me.
I was told that Frank wanted to be close enough to control her and understand on me now.
Me? Whatever. We're live on the record, folks.
So we nice?
Thank you.
All right, we good? There we go. All right, we are videotaping and recording this evening. Make sure your microphones are on and ready to go. It is 7:01. Oh, I forgot to say we're at executive session. We probably got out of there at, 6:55?
Yep.
We'll call it 6:55. It is Monday, April 16, 2018, regular council meeting for the City of Woodland. If I can get everyone to silence your cell phones and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. Mrs. Ripp, if you could please take the roll.
Councilmember Graham?
Here.
Councilmember Rounds?
Here.
Councilmember Plaza?
Here.
Councilmember Chapman?
Here.
Councilmember Trigger?
Here.
Councilmember Hubbard?
Here.
All right, everyone is here and accounted for. Moving on to presentations and proclamations. I have a proclamation this evening for Arbor Day, which, by the way, is it later on in the agenda? I can't remember. Are we talking about the park later? Okay, perfect. All right, Arbor Day 2018, whereas Arbor Day was first observed in 1872 with the planting of more than 1 million trees in the state of Nebraska, and whereas Washington, the evergreen state, has celebrated Arbor Day since 1917, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and world, and whereas the City of Woodland is designated as Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation, and whereas trees clean the air and water, produce oxygen, reduce stormwater runoff, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, reduce erosion and compaction of our precious topsoil from water and wind, beautify our neighborhoods, reduce stress, and provide food and habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees help build community and unify and beautify neighborhoods, and whereas they are planted, trees are a resource of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Mayor William A. Finn, do hereby proclaim the month of April as Arbor Month and April 18th as Arbor Day 2018 in the City of Woodland, and urge all citizens to support to protect our trees and natural areas for the well-being of present and future generations, dated the 16th day of April 2018. Thank you very much. All right. Moving on to citizen communication, not on the agenda, and we have one person, former council member Marilee McCall. Get your stuff, please. Nice to see you again.
Good evening, Council. First, I wanted to make sure that Council and the community was invited to an event that I'm helping to organize with CRESA and with the City of Vancouver. It will be held at Clark College on May 12th. It's an open house style from 10 to 3, and it is for emergency preparedness and Map Your Neighborhood, which is a program where your neighbors get together, a small group or a larger group up to 20, and you actually map your neighborhood, find out where your gas lines are, your water shut-off lines are, and find out who in the the neighborhood needs additional assistance, maybe they're on oxygen, dialysis, or maybe they are younger and they have children that are not attended, and if there's an earthquake or a flood, there's someone else in the neighborhood that can check on them. So it would be great if you could attend with us on May 12th. It is Mother's Day weekend, so I know that that's busy. And I will also forward something to you via email so that you have a follow-up on that.
What was the time on that again?
It's from 10 to 3.
10 to 3.
And where's it at?
Clark College in the Geyser Hall.
Okay. Awesome.
And now that I have the happy stuff done,
Oh, jeez. Wait a second.
Okay.
One thing at a time. Go ahead. Number 2. Yes,
address
sorry.
for the record is 84 River Rock Lane in Woodland.
Sorry about that. Yes. All right, go ahead. Number 2.
Okay, so number 2 is, I watched with quite a bit of dismay the process with the parks that were approved. I was really disappointed that I spent a lot of time on writing out my concerns and sending emails to everyone. The only person I got a response from was Councilmember Fredericks, and I did copy it to you, Mayor Finn, and I copied it to Mr. Boyce as well as Tracy, the Public Works person. I am extremely concerned about the impact to exit 21. Because of that, I think that dogs running around is going to be a distraction. There's also a potential for liability if those dogs get loose and one of them gets hit and causes an accident. That's a liability for the city to get sued. I realize that it's off of the beaten path, but if it's visible at all from that exit 21, I've been using that for 13 years, and I know how jammed up it gets, and it just takes a few moments of somebody looking to the side of a cute dog is running over that hill, and boom, you've got a rear-end accident at that intersection, which is already jammed up and backing up onto the freeway. And we're trying to fix it, and I feel like we're adding an additional potential problem there. The other concern that I had regarding that park is that it is WashDOT property for potential park and ride. As we continue to get more congested and more people do actually take the option of carpooling, there are people that actually meet there to carpool from Longview and park in the Chamber of Commerce park and ride parking lot. When that fills up, where are we going to go? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if we have that fenced off as a dog park and that's established as a use for that property, and you talk about taking that away, there will be a lot of extremely unhappy people. And my last concern, there were more than 3 concerns, but my last concern I wanted to express tonight was the dog parks that they've set up in Vancouver. Prior to setting them up, they already had volunteer groups that had stepped forward to do maintenance and patrol and make sure that they were cleaned up. And there's a lot of people, I am a dog owner, and I think that it would be great to have a dog park, but if I wasn't a dog owner, I wouldn't be happy about my tax dollars being used for public works crews to clean up dog poo. So that was my last concern on that. And I just wanted to make sure that I did express it for the record, because I had sent my email in and I didn't get a response. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back.
All right. Thank you, Ms. McCall. All right, anyone else in the gallery for items not on the agenda? I have no one else signed up. If you fail to do so, now is your opportunity to step forward. All right, moving on for items on the agenda. First up, we have Mr. Steve Madsen, and as you step up to the podium, we have a few that are going to speak this evening. If you could please state your name and address for the record. Thank you. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I won't need 5 minutes, but appreciate it. My name is Steve Madsen. I'm General Counsel for Aho Construction. Aho Construction's address is 5512 Northeast 109th Court, Vancouver, Washington, 98662. I'm here to speak in favor of the agenda item, moving our proposal to comprehensive plan update mode, I guess, is the best way to phrase it. I want to thank staff for the work that they've done on this so far. you have an awesome team there. I know most of them are new to their positions, but we work in a number of jurisdictions around the state. I work for AHO in a number of jurisdictions around the state, and it is refreshing to be able to work with staff that is simply interested in the betterment of what makes sense, I guess. Travis was great to work with down in Clark County when I worked with him previously. Tracy has been just crazy motivated to try to find solutions for what are going to be some difficult, challenging problems with this proposal. I want to thank council for reshaping its vision, I guess is the best way to put it. I have lived in Cowlitz County personally off and on since 1969. I graduated from Kelso in 1983. My family moved here 11 years ago to the community, and I'm on the school board. My daughter goes to the local school here, and what I see with this proposal is part of a bigger vision for the community of Woodland, a modern vision that brings us into the 21st century. And I know that AHO will be a diligent partner in doing a project that meets the city's needs as well as our economic and financial needs. That is important to us. We've built thousands of houses in Southwest Washington. Community. I just want to leave off with the fact that I am personally owned for all the years and all the hard times I've seen in this county. It's amazing to see something like this come. So I hope the council feels the same way, but we want to support staff's recommendation and the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mattson. Ms. McCall.
Hello again, Marilyn McCall, 84 River Rock Lane in Woodland, Washington on the east side. I saw on the Facebook that you were taking comments on transportation, and so I was assuming that this was the portion I was supposed to speak to.
Yes, we can, absolutely.
Okay. I had a lot of concerns while I was still on council when the subdivision was approved again. There was a plat that was waiting for the 37 townhomes that are going to go in off of Hillshire.
Sequoia Park.
Excuse me?
Sequoia Park.
Sequoia Park.
Okay.
And I had hoped that we would work something out and actually, instead of them having that trail that has the stanchions for emergency to be used, that they would actually put another exit there. And that didn't work out, and so they're not doing that. So those vehicles are going to be probably heading out and coming out Hillshire, and then they'll also be trying to turn left when they come back, going into Hillshire. And currently, probably only 4 cars can stack turning left into Hillshire out of the roundabout. And depending on what time of day you go through there, it's a C-, D, D-, going through there, depending on what time of day that you go. Since I have sold my house and I am packing a lot of things, I was looking back, because how I wound up on council was the Merriweather subdivision. And interestingly enough, it states in the original paperwork that they were going to do a left-hand turn onto Incel with a signal. I don't think that's ever happened, and I could not find anything that had been renegotiated and wasn't going to happen. And they're still working on that subdivision, so maybe there's not enough houses there that they haven't met the tipping point to where they are required to do that. But I think there's going to be an issue of wanting people encouraging people to go up to Incel so that they don't stop and back up the roundabout, which has been a great solution for traffic on the east side. It's been really wonderful to have that. It moves through. You don't get, we used to back up all the way to Dairy Queen trying to get onto the River Road. And if it does back up and people are used to going around the roundabout, then you've got another rear-end situation where you've got accidents again, which is what we were trying to avoid. So that was a hot point or a hot place that I was concerned about as you move into the future. And the other package of what's going to happen with all of that area is when you get the Scott Hill Park going and you've got people that are not wanting to come in the backside and they come through Merriweather instead, then that's going to jam it up even farther. Those are my main concerns because that's where I live. I could give you a list, you know how I get. I could give you a list of probably 50 other things that are pieces that I'm concerned about, but part of my biggest concern is we fought and argued and spent several years to get that roundabout in and propose it to the neighborhood and everybody on the east side that was going to be a solution. And if we aren't careful with the additional build-out that's happening there, it won't be a solution anymore. And then it feels like it's only been there for 3 years. It'll feel like we spent that money and all the effort and the planning effort, and then we've got a failed intersection again. So there are some other options that we can look at to reroute people or of where they're going to turn left, and I'd like to make sure that that gets looked at.
Are you suggesting that there was paperwork that the developer of the Merriweather complex was to pay for a signal at Insel?
Turning at Insel.
Okay.
I had it in my hands 2 weeks ago when I was going through stuff, but I don't know if after that fact there was another renegotiation, because I know that was when the market crashed, and then there were some other discussions of how to incentivize them continuing to build there. So I don't have any paperwork as to whether there was something changed and renegotiated, and there very well could have been. But originally that was supposed to happen, and so if that wasn't renegotiated, it probably should be taken a look at again.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Okay?
Can I clarify a comment?
Mr. Frederick.
Just would ask you to actually clarify the comment. It was Merriweather that was responsible for that, or Sequoia?
No,
Merriweather.
Merriweather. This is
We did approach the-
2005, 2006, of when I came on council.
We did approach the Sequoia developers, and
I remember that.
I believe you were still here for that, yes.
I recall that. I know you did try.
We tried.
And I do appreciate that you did try. And so, I just don't want to see people getting rear-ended on
Absolutely.
there. But I won't, because I won't be here.
All right, thank you,
So
Ms.
thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ms. McCall. Mr. Houston Aho. All right. Mr. Mel Aho. No comment?
Steve has done a good job.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
everything. I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Are you staying for the remainder of the meeting this evening? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Ms. Keene?
City Council and Mayor, first, thank you for providing video of the City Council meetings on the city website. I was on vacation at when you held the April 2nd meeting, but was able to view Tracy Coleman's presentation regarding the transportation when I returned. The transportation plan that was presented at the meeting addresses many of the issues pertaining to the industrial area of the city that property owners, developers, and businesses have expressed to the port. The long-term planning for future roads in the industrial area and expectant growth is absolutely spot on. Original planning efforts between the Public Works Director, Rob Vanderzanden, and Port Manager Dave Ripp discussed and illustrated the extension of this roadway when Sherman Way Industrial Area was conceived and developed back in the 1980s and early 1990s. Original transportation plans in the 1980s and 90s also showed extensions of some of the roadways that Tracy identified. Transportation and access to existing interchanges will create further chokeholds to Interstate 5. The potential development of the Donald Farm land transaction and the 426 acres of industrial land under the feasibility study that the port and the city are partnering on will create a disastrous mix of residential and industrial traffic. Given the state's lack of desire on the Scott Avenue overpass, an alternative access point to I-5 is key. With the state and federal acceptance of the extension of Pinkerton to I-5 will be a huge win for Woodland, providing a solution that developers and landowners have expressed to the city for many years. An extension of water and sewer services would be unnecessary without a fix to the transportation access, as it is that critical. As I mentioned, particular extensions to Howard Way, Sherman, and Pekin, identified as J, R, O, and Q on the map, have been long discussed between the port and the city for decades. This has been vetted through property owners over decades, and the work completed by Tracy and Travis is a culmination of decades of discussions, plans, and concerns addressed by those impacted. These plans are absolutely critical for the city as well as the port to access grant funds. The port will begin applying for funding for our 2 industrial parks at Guile Road before the end of the year, and will be working with the city to access transportation funds for Howard Way Extension and the new road identified as J on the map. Doesn't have a name yet. The port and the city will not be eligible for these grants without these road extensions and without it being on the city's transportation plan. As you are probably aware, these plans are submitted to the Regional Transportation Plan and become eligible for state and federal funding. By accessing these grant funds, this brings tax dollars back to our community to invest in the industrial development, providing long-term property investments to the city. Developers, businesses, and property owners have heard the message from the city. We are open for business. I fully support the effort by Tracy and Travis to address the overall city's transportation issues and the road extensions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keene. Anyone else in the gallery for items on the agenda? If you failed to do so, you can step forward now. I saw you walk in, and I was going to suggest that maybe not on the agenda or on the agenda. Please step forward, Ms. Thoney.
I apologize for being late.
That's all right.
84-year-old lady in doctor's appointment.
State your name and your address, please.
Erin Thoney, Goy Road, Woodland. We like the transportation study, except it's a little different from when we were annexed in. Road Q is probably our main concern. We think
Q. Okay.
is too close to the railroad tracks, because right now, as you come over the railroad tracks, sometimes there's a chokehold right on top and the school's getting out, and a train comes by, and there's a backup on North Pekin going north. You can be sitting on top of the railroad tracks with no place to go while you're waiting to go straight down Gorig. So that needs to probably be brought back to where it was when we were annexed in, when there was a transportation study that put it more towards the, kind of actually in the middle of our land. But that's what was adopted into the city code back when we were annexed. And I agree, we need something better with the, I caught the last of Jennifer's comments of better access on I-5, that it's a pinch point chokehold area. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Thoney. Anyone else for items on the agenda who failed to do so? Sir? Please state your name and address.
I'm Alan Engstrom. I live in Longview, Washington. I'm an attorney here representing primarily the owners of Walt's Meats.
Okay.
And I'm looking for an informational item, really, in regards to the proposal for the Donald Farm. And that is, the Woodland Planning document says there should be all of the changes to the comprehensive plan should be approved or considered at one time during the year. And I'm wondering if that's the process that's going to be followed for this.
It is. This is the
Okay.
first step in getting this project to the comprehensive plan.
That's
Mr.
all I
Goddard,
need to know.
Am I correct on that? I just want to make sure I stated that correctly. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And sir, can you please spell your last name for me?
Engstrom is E-N-G-S-T-R-O-M. Allen is A-L-A-N.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir. All right. If you have a card, if you can drop it with Mr. Goddard in case there's further action, or...
I've already spoken.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you, sir. All right. Anyone else for items on the agenda who would like to step forward now? All right. That concludes our citizen comment portion. Moving on to agenda. Chair will accept a motion to approve the agenda.
Move to approve?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Humber, seconded by Councilmember Plaza. Will the clerk please take the vote?
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Round?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Humber?
Aye.
Councilmember Frederick?
Aye.
All right, agenda's been approved. Moving on to Finance and General Government for reports of standing committees. Mr. Fredericks.
Yes, we met on April 9th. We reviewed a janitorial contract, or actually we reviewed some of the janitorial contract, but the bids were due by April 27th. They'll be back to the Finance Committee on the 14th of May, and they'll be to the council for consideration on the 21st. We also reviewed the Humane Society contract, which was old business. The city administrator reported that Longview, Kelso, and Castle Rock met, and an operations audit was conducted by Benton Franklin Humane Society, and they presented a report with recommendations to the Cowlitz Humane Society. And they're looking at efficiencies to gain on adoptions, enforcement versus shelter, and the fees that are being evaluated by the entities. We are still reviewing the special events, special use permits, and street closures and block parties. They just provided a status on that, and the Public Works Director reviewed with the Public Works Committee and made some comments. This is still a pending item. All fees, the fees resolution has been pending. We do have a target date of June 11th to have it back to the Finance Committee. And June 18th, we are suggesting a workshop. The committee is suggesting a workshop for that item on June 18th to council, and we're hoping for action at the July 2nd meeting. The Public Records Act, we reviewed the Public Records Act. New fees, there's an update. We are waiting for the city attorney on guidance on a fee resolution. We're setting a public hearing date of July 2nd. We'll publish that. And we're looking at setting a workshop on June 18th with a public hearing scheduled for July 2nd, which I already said. I said that twice. Discussion ensued. We wanted to make sure that we had the council requests for information were included in this, anything that we're bringing forward, and we're looking for some sample language that will be obtained from other jurisdictions to incorporate it into the policy. Upcoming items that we have: newspaper of records, we're going to be accepting bids, website update, that's also in progress. I would also encourage members of council, there's a spot to put a bio on the council website. If you're interested, you can provide that to Mr. Boyce or Mrs. Ripp, and they can ensure that it gets put on the city's website. Vision Cash Management high-speed remittance software upgrade, that is in progress. Is that right? Yes. We also have a utility rate study, and the business license ordinance will need to be repealed per the current fee policy. So those are some of the things that we're working on in the committee. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 14th at 5:30 at the City Hall Conference Room.
Questions for Mr. Fredericks? All right. Thank you, Mr. Fredericks. Moving on to reports of officers. I am the mayor, so I'll go first. On April 24th, which is next Tuesday, AWC Small City Connector in Kalama from 5 to 8. Please register or RSVP with Mrs. Rip or staff if you are planning on attending. That is the same meeting that we held here last year, or I think it was last year. It's last year. It's a stop along the way, and every year a new city gets to host. You get some valuable information out of that, so I encourage. What's that? Do we know the location in Kalama? Is it at their community center?
Yes.
Community center? Community center, from 5 to 8. It's a good meeting. It's a good place to network as well. We had folks from Battleground, Camas, West Center, Washougal, all attend last year. 216 Elm Street. I encourage council, those that can attend, to do so. Valuable information comes out there on the plan moving forward with AWC coming into 2018 or 2019 as well. We currently are still accepting applications for council vacancies, so those in the gallery or at home watching and listening, or future watchers or listeners, we are looking for someone who lives within the city limits, looking to serve to finish out Councilmember Jacobs' term. So about a year and a half or so, a little over a year and a half is the term before that spot is up for re-election as well. So I encourage you. That closes on the 23rd. Is that correct? Okay, so that closes on Monday, so please get your applications in. We've received a few already. We have a park board vacancy for appointment. We will have an upcoming planning commission vacancy after May. So those that are looking to serve, and also civil service commission vacancy as well. All three of those have terms that are expired or going to expire, so if you're looking to serve your community, please step forward and put an application for consideration. You can do that through the website or through City Hall. I'm trying to think if I did anything crazy. I've been gone, so I'm back. I haven't done anything too wild. I'd like to speak to action item G on the agenda this evening before we get there, which is the adoption of Resolution 700 to accept the Ajo and Tenford Donaldson subdivision. I know Ms. Keene, she's still here. We've attended some meetings together previous to this coming forward, and I've said it once and I'll say it again. I was wrong with what I had said when questioned by the port of, we want jobs here, we're open for business, but where are you going to house anyone? And I believe my comment was, let them move to Richfield. That was not appropriate. I was more concerned about business. I was more concerned about creating our tax base, but if the homes aren't here, we're not going to get the businesses to move here as well. I've realized the errors of my comments, and I apologize. But I do support action item G. It is needed. We have a lack of housing in our community. Those around us are growing. City of Woodland needs to kind of step up with that as well, especially with our 426 acres that we want to develop and create a sustainable future for our community. I encourage council to pass this and allow it to go on to the next step. I believe that the developer, and who is here and can answer questions when it comes time, is a valued member of every community that they go into. I've had many conversations with those within our community and with Mr. Ajo as well, and believe that community is absolutely the forefront of his developments. And I've heard tremendous and positive stories about the organization and how even through troubled times have been able to continually provide jobs to the people during the recession. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud that we have been chosen as a location for this development. So I encourage council to approve that. And that's all I have. Mr. Boyce.
Okay, there's notice of a liquor license renewal, Lewis River Shell Mart, 1141 Lewis River Road. Councilmember Fredericks alluded to the meeting I had with regarding the Humane Society. I met with the cities of Longview, Kelso, Kalama, Castle Rock, and Cowlitz County, the entities that use the Humane Society for animal control. We're attempting to pool our resources to understand the financials of the Humane Society. I understand they have a new permanent director of the Humane Society. We're going to meet as a group one more time and then engage the Humane Society to see what we can put together for 2019. So it's a work in progress. With that, I just have the upcoming community events. Looks like April 18th is going to be a busy day. Arbor Day observance ceremony. That will be at Gord Park at 11:30 a.m. Also that evening, the WQCC meets right here in council chambers at 6 p.m. Park Board has a meeting at 4 p.m. also on the 18th. Woodland Action Center has their board meeting at 6:30 p.m. April 19th, Planning Commission will meet in this room at 7 p.m. April 21st through the 13th, we have Lilac Days. April 26th, after hours at Holland American Bolt Farm, 5 to 7 p.m. April 29th, Bruins Marathon, a half marathon and 10K races. And May 5th, Woodland's Got Talent at the Woodland Middle School, 6:30 p.m. That's all I have for this evening.
Yes, Ms. Humberg.
I also would like to invite you all to the VFW on Saturday evening from 5 to 8. We're doing a welcome spring barbecue. There'll be pulled pork sandwiches, baked beans, coleslaw, dessert, drinks, and live music. So come help support our local veterans. Also, if you noticed out front of the VFW, there's a box that sort of looks like the old mailbox that was done by one of our Eagle Scouts to help get his Eagle status. And it's for your flag. So if you have a flag that you need to dispose of properly, take it down and just open the door and put it in, and the Scouts will dispose of your flags in the proper way.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
I put 7 of them in there
Thank you.
on Saturday, so that's really cool. It's a really nice
It's very nice.
setup there,
Yes.
really cool.
Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Boyce or myself before we move on? All right, and thank you to those who came forward this evening and spoke. I'm trying to remember who said, I think it was Mr. Madsen who said we've assembled a wonderful team sitting there at the desk, and I can't agree more. I ask a lot of these individuals that are sitting over here at this desk, and I couldn't do the job without them. So I look at this agenda and I look forward, and I know how much hard work has been put into this, and I appreciate your dedication to the city. I just want to get that out there as well. Chair will accept a motion to approve the consent items.
Move to approve the consent items.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Humberg, second by Councilmember Rounds. Will the clerk please take the vote?
Councilmember Humber?
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Councilmember Frederick?
Aye.
All right, consent items have been approved. Moving on to action items. Action item F, authorize mayor to sign interlocal agreement for fire marshal services with Clark County Fire and Rescue. And before we move on, Mr. Boyce has a statement.
Right. The city attorney did review the contract and had some suggestions regarding the language where we indemnify each other. So we'd like to modify our staff request. CCFR has also been contacted. They're in agreement with the changes that are proposed. We'd like council to authorize the mayor to execute the agreement contingent upon the city attorney's review of the new language regarding indemnification.
All right, moving on to action item F, authorize mayor to sign the interlocal agreement for fire marshal services with Clark County Fire and Rescue.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Humberg, second by Councilmember Chapman. Councilmember Humberg.
At our safety meeting tonight, Chief Jackson explained what it was and the words that needed to be changed, and it all makes perfect sense, and it's a good thing. So I would suggest that we vote yes on this.
Councilmember Chapman.
No comment.
Further discussion? Mr. Fredericks.
I just want to be sure this motion incorporates that this is contingent upon city attorney review. The motion that's on the floor just says we're going to pass it as it is and nothing really into the record other than what's been said by the city administrator. So,
Okay, so do I need to redo my...
I can either do that, or I can just make an amendment to add that it's contingent upon that.
Mr. Fredericks?
I'll move to amend the motion that it's, this agreement can be executed contingent upon city attorney review regarding the indemnification language.
Second.
Amend to the motion on the floor by Councilmember Fredericks, seconded by Councilmember Plaza. Motion on the floor is to convey a message that... Yes, we do, but if you could say that one more time, please.
Sure, that
Upon
it's executable, but it's contingent upon city attorney review regarding indemnification language.
Mr. Fredericks?
No discussion.
Mr. Plaza? Further discussion on the amendment? All right, will the clerk please take the vote on the amendment only, please?
Councilmember Rouse?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Humbert?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
All right, the amended motion has passed. Back to the original motion on the floor now, with the amendment. Further discussion? All right, will the clerk please take the vote on action item F with the amendment?
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Humbert?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Round?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
All right, action item F has passed. Moving on to action item G, adopt resolution number 700 to accept Ajo and Tenford Donald subdivision and authorize staff to proceed with comprehensive plan amendment docket for 2018-2019.
Move to adopt resolution 700.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilmember Fredericks, seconded by Councilmember Rouse. Councilmember Fredericks.
Just a question on process for Mr. Goddard. I don't ever remember going this route on anything previous that has come. Can you maybe expand on what you've done a very nice job, what you've done here in spelling it out. But could you expand on that a little bit further? Because I feel like this is almost saying yes, even though it's not.
Yeah. Because I'm sure you'll prompt some questions.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find like a complete pass-down manual. I've been able to find several documents in different places that help me understand how previous planners were doing the job. And so I also have to say that I have never done a comprehensive plan update process before. I've written new comprehensive plans but never done a formal update under a Growth Management Act plan. So part of it is I was doing the best I could based upon the guidance that is in the comprehensive plan and the code. And there are two applications that are available or on the fee schedule. And the first one is a letter of intent, and the second one is an application. And from what I could understand from previous files is that the letter of intent was the opportunity for the council to essentially say, yes, we feel this is something we want to engage in, so it should go as part of that docket to be considered with everything else. And I think my experience, having just come on board when you were dealing with the Glenwood site comprehensive plan and rezone, is it would have been a great opportunity if you had had a chance to consider whether or not it was something that the community was best for the community before they actually applied and spent all of their money to engage a consultant and engage attorneys to get involved in that process. So I kind of am feeling my way in the dark here, but based upon what code I had, this is what I felt the correct route based upon the existing code and the existing comprehensive plan direction. So the other thing that you mentioned then, that was, are you agreeing to it? You are not agreeing to any particular project at this point. I tried in my staff report to point out that the applicant appears to be making the argument that there is a better way to implement the comprehensive plan and that includes looking at the urban growth area boundary. That is a policy decision, and so this I felt was the correct process to bring it before you to have the opportunity to make that policy decision, especially since I am new staff and there are new members on the board and on the planning commission, so I felt it's only 2 years since the adoption of the comprehensive plan, but there's some stuff in it that I have questions about. So it's my opportunity to talk to the community about what does this mean to you? How did it get in the code or the plan? And what does it mean? But there is no buying off on a particular proposal at this point.
So everyone would, so you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're suggesting that maybe in the past that we have not followed the appropriate process when we receive a letter of intent. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's as far as I can tell, and I can't tell how far it goes back because I've found some files that show that there were letters of intent where people wanted to talk about annexation and it didn't actually go anywhere. There's no documentation as to whether or not it was brought before the council or the planning commission and denied or approved. So unfortunately, a lot of the filing system is based upon year and project name. And so if I come across a piece of paper and I can't tell what year it came in, I can't actually track down to find out if there was a file that went along with it or if there's multiple files. I don't know the name of the file that it went under, so there are a lot of hanging chads out there that I have to kind of reinvent what I think happened at that point. And in this case, I felt to take it to you to decide whether you wanted me to pursue it was the logical course of action.
Okay. Are you, just a side question, I'm assuming you're fixing that process for filing, so if you were to win the Powerball tomorrow, there would be a better way of doing things?
We have vision permits, which has been in place for a couple of years, and I am working with Janice, the permit technician. We're trying to create a process where we are consistently inserting information into that system so that not only can we tell what the application name is, where it was, and how much they paid, we can now see the documents that go along with that application, and it's cross-referenced to parcels and addresses. So the system is in place. We are just doing our best to kind of insert information as we can. So yes, I can't tell you where all the paper files are going to go, but I can tell you electronically we are trying to modernize.
Okay, and I would assume, I'm just going to ask the question, that Mr. Randolph has reviewed this and finds it to be consistent with law?
Yes, sir. If I may, it's Travis and I trying to take lessons learned because because the comprehensive plan is exactly that. It's not supposed to be piecemeal. It should be something that should be done on a regular process. Likewise, people should know when to submit. And we're talking with Travis about having some sort of rhythm set up where applications need to be filed by June or July or something like that, goes through a planning commission review. And right now, the council could not look at any comp plan amendment prior to February of next year. So we need to sort of establish that rhythm. The other thing is to make sure we don't mix apples and oranges. Last time, sort of what was coming up to the council was a purely legislative decision, which is a comp plan review, and likewise a rezone, which was a quasi-judicial, and it was mixing apples and oranges. What we want to do is get the plan up to you. If there's others, have it at the same time, and there'll be a legislative act with full discretion to do whatever the council decides it wants to do. So that's the purpose, is to try and get that system set up.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, he reminded me of one thing that I needed to mention, and that was because you had taken a look at the Glenwood during the 2018 year, I was trying to figure out a way for you to take a look at these projects without it actually being the review of a comprehensive plan project, because I know there's 5 or 6 of these that are going to come in this year, And if I had brought it to you as an application, you would be done for this year again. So by having this process, it seems like it was put in place for you to give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, Roman style, for it to go in the packet for this year. So that way you can take a look at all 6 of them and figure out, are they the kind of projects that you want to pursue without having shot your silver bullet for this year.
Okay.
I just want to say that we are improving process inside City Hall. That's all.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, further comments, Mr. Bennett?
I have that.
Councilmember Rounds?
No comment.
Further discussion? All right, will the clerk please take the vote on Resolution 700, action item G as in George?
Councilmember Rounds?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Hubbard?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
All right, action item G has passed. It is 7:50. We are at a regular council meeting. Does council need a break before we move into the workshop?
Please.
All right, we'll take a quick 5-minute break. I just like doing that. Right there, just like that. 18 through 2023, otherwise known as the TIP. So, who's gonna pop off on this one here? Who's gonna kick us off? What?
Would anyone like paper copies? Sorry, these are small ones, but...
That's better than something.
Where's the wall-size ones, Mr. Goddard?
Yeah, that one was a lot better. Needed this blown up.
Did you just say Tracy did a better job 2 weeks ago with her map? Oh, okay, just checking.
The big one that everybody had to go together on, each individual prints.
I know that you're very competitive, such as myself. You won last time, apparently, just so you know.
All right. Travis is going to take the floor tonight.
All right, Mr. Goddard, kick us off here.
The map that you have in front of you is the result of several conversations that I have been having with the Public Works Department and various members of the public. But it is the result of informal conversations. We have had internal staff conversations, and we kind of looked at what are the projects that are coming up and what are the needed infrastructure improvements. So if you look at U, T, M, E, let's see, C, and those are the ones that we've pretty much identified as a result of applications that have come through the office. And we were struggling with the issue of, do we really need these? And the answer to that is yes, from a practical point of view, but they weren't in the approved transportation improvement program. And so, as a result, for example, Cherry Blossom is not in the comprehensive plan. So we had to have the conversation with B. Young RV about dedicating potential future right-of-way, or at least designing their project so that they could leave the room for that in the future. Once it is on the transportation improvement program, when an applicant comes in, staff can take the position that there is supposed to be a road here, so include that in your plans so that they know at the very beginning rather than at the end when we write the decision that says the city needs cross-circulation. So that conversation led to a second conversation, which was, what are all the things that should be on this list that aren't on the list, even though there's no application pending? The intersection of East Scott and Old Pacific Highway, the intersection of Green Mountain and Old Pacific Highway. Those are the natural intersections where they leave something to be desired, so they should be on this list for us to pay attention to. And then this kind of north-south connector on the other side of the train tracks. And you start with one line, and then it's like, well, next to the train tracks doesn't work because now nobody can get to the train tracks, so you move a little to the west, and then it's like, well, that's not really on the property line, and then you look for property lines, and so you can't really decide what makes the most sense, so you just throw them all on there, and we'll have the conversation and bid them or estimate what it would cost to build them, and then eventually we'll bring those to you with the idea that, okay, this option costs this option would cost that, and do you think it warrants staying on the list, or let's see what the applicants think when they come through. So that's kind of how the genesis of this came about. The fact that it is on this list doesn't necessarily mean that it will ever get built, like other projects that are on your transportation improvement program, like the Scott overpass. There's no guarantee that that will ever be built just because it's on your wish list or your needs list. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll get funded. But what Tracy and I quickly realized is, as we're starting to apply and look at these different grant programs, they won't even talk to you unless you have some kind of vision for what's going to happen. So, you know, if we get exit 20 south of Horseshoe Lake, all of a sudden we're going to need something to get that truck traffic north and into the industrial district. So it's got to get across the tracks, and very quickly, you know, one thing leads to another, and they're all a house of cards that rely upon each other. So there are a lot of things on this list, and there's a lot of money on this list, but it's just a vision at this point. So what we're asking you to do is, if you have any guidance for us, if you have any suggestions for us, we're taking this to the Planning Commission Thursday night, and then we will do public or an open house maybe in May or early June, and have the public bring in a bunch of ideas or other suggestions, see if there's anybody else who has projects that we haven't thought of yet. And at this point, we're really just here to get your suggestions, anything you don't want to see, anything you want us to look into that we haven't thought of yet.
Sorry, I was looking at the map.
I got a question.
Mr. Fredericks.
What is S? Can you speak to S? What, it says Scott Atlantic Pacific.
That's the overpass connection connecting the two sides of Scott Street. It's currently on the tip, and because there was a lot being thrown at the wall here, several people that I had talked to has mentioned, yeah, has that died? And that's not the intention at this point. It's just to make sure that all of the projects are in consideration. But that's the overpass that we had the study done for, and the potential access to the highway.
Scott.
Exit 21, which is not included on this map. I'm concerned that one of the proposals that's going to be provided, and I'm concerned that it's going to be multiple roundabouts as a solution that's provided. Are we looking at having direct access to I-5 southbound from Scott if ultimately that project is not decided to move forward for whatever reason? Is that an option to look at as an option?
Ms. Coleman.
I can speak a little bit on that. So, with my conversations with WashDOT, the only option that WashDOT has come forward and shared with us that they would prefer to see is, on Scott Avenue in particular, is an overpass, not an underpass. They're against an underpass at all, which I've kind of brought up in the past. So, you know, there's always that option for the overpass. It's always there, but it's the cost. It's cost prohibitive. So, you know, when you're saying if exit 21, there's multiple roundabouts, that is going to be a proposal. I brought that up as well, that is a proposal that WashDOT will come forward to us with. But there's also other proposals they're going to bring to us, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. I don't know that yet. I'm expecting that to come into our office in the next couple months, and then I'll present that at a council meeting to show you what their solution is for exit 21. But nothing that's on this plan takes away from the Scott Avenue reconnect or anything else that is on the transportation improvement plan. It's only in addition to. So if you say, you know, can we still do that? Absolutely, if you have the dollars to do it. You can do anything you want if you have the dollars, but it's how do we get the dollars? And we get the dollars by having different options available to us on this plan to apply for any grant dollars we can that might need funding. It is for truck transportation, freight mobility. It is for actual access to the I-5 interstate. It is actual, maybe a crossover. So there's all different funding opportunities that are available depending on what your road does. Maybe it crosses a railroad track or goes under a railroad track. But those grant dollars are only available in certain chunks throughout depending on what your road is doing and what access it's creating, whether it's for transportation improvement or whether it's just for trucking industries. So, or maybe it's just for boats down by the water, or it's just for boat launches. So what we're saying is we're just throwing a whole bunch of different ideas out there to say, here's a whole bunch of different options to look at. It doesn't take away anything that we've already had on there in the past.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the sandwich making process of the, where are we at? How does that work? And how does the public participation go here from this point forward?
First of all, I'm never going to live this down, and I'm okay with that.
No, it's a perfect analogy. It works great.
It does.
It really does.
So right now, it sounds like Mr. Frederick's saying we're bringing them peanut butter and jelly, and how does the public get in on a turkey sandwich?
Sure. So at this point, we're just theoretically talking about potential projects that might be needed. We can do this a couple ways. We can go out to the open house. We can include public input, maybe do some prioritization, and then do some cost estimating for each individual project. We could also narrow it down and do some cost estimating, or we could do a cost estimate for all of them, and then take them to the public open house and have people look at them associated with costs, and then prioritize them based upon that, see whatever shakes out after people know how much it costs versus, when you insert the cost, you automatically skew people's opinion as to whether or not they think it's viable. So they might ignore the most important improvements because they think it's cost prohibitive. So there's a couple ways that we can do this, but theoretically at this point, we are making sausage and we're going to pack everybody in the room and get everybody's opinion.
Sure.
And then ultimately, we'll have to have those cost estimates, and then we'll let you prioritize and figure out what you think is reasonable and what we can fund within the next 6 years, which is theoretically the tip horizon of 6 years. So this might be the comprehensive plan Verizon for 50 years, but we want to make sure that everything's included for people to have their opinion.
And tonight was an opportunity for folks to step forward. We did hear from some. Planning Commission will be an opportunity for them to step forward as well. Is this going to come back again to council for approval?
Yes.
Which will have another opportunity for the community to be involved. And then also, as Mr. Goddard said, some open house if needed. Ms.
Something I
Paul?
want to add as well, and Travis and I talked about this yesterday, this isn't the only thing that we're asking to put on this transportation improvement plan. Other items that go on here are, pavement milling, resurfacing, replacing our asphalt on our roads, and if you look at that transportation improvement plan that we have right now, none of those are included on there. We might have one road on there. Well, if you drive around your entire city, there's more than one road that needs work on it. So one of the items that we need to do is, since there has been such a high turnover of staff, is we actually need to get in our car and drive and take photos and say, okay, what roads do we need to concentrate on that need to actually go on this plan as well to resurface or to replace? So that will be coming forward as well, and there's going to be some that are worse than others. So that will be part of this plan as well, added to that plan.
So the plans that we've adopted in the past have had a priority attached to it. Will these have a priority attached to what is brought forward to council, and how will you be arriving at that priority? How will you come up with the priority that is brought? Typically, the way it works is it'll be brought before the council based upon what staff believes is the priority, and from there, we kind of get the, here you go, this is what we think, is this what you think, and is that our opportunity to move things around? Because I'm looking at one of these here that has been on, 10 years ago, it was listed as priority number 1 in our community, which was the Blacktail connection. That to me is, I'd like to connect neighborhoods, and I think that's important, but I don't think that's the number one priority in our community. So can you tell me a little bit about that process on how priorities will be set?
Sure. So I envision that we're going to get a public input. We're going to have people prioritize what they think is their most important. I don't know whether we'll do it first choice through or high priority, medium priority, low priority. Then we'll figure out some dollars to attach to those, and we'll go to the Planning Commission after the public hearing, and we'll talk about, okay, the options that we have are rated from most important, most critical to least critical. We can also prepare a list, a scoring for what's critical for adding capacity and what will affect the actual traffic flow in the community and some of the capacity issues. And we'll assign scores for each one of those, and we'll work through the Planning Commission to wrestle with those issues and assign scores. So you might even get the staff's scores and the Planning Commission scores, and then you'll ultimately be able to figure out, okay, having all of those things to balance, you're going to have to decide ultimately what you're going to fund. And you may adopt a list or a map of projects separate from the prioritization, and then through your TIP process decide what you're going to fund, which will lead to the natural conversation about, well, how can we raise local funds to do our match for this? Because ultimately you're going to have to be the ones who decide what are our impact fees going to be, what are our development costs, what gets paid for by the developer versus what's the city's portion of supporting these individual projects. But at that point, you should have an objective scoring that includes technical difficulty, how long it would take to actually design and review, the actual costs, and then the grants available, and we can take a look at a couple years out, figure out how much money is coming down the pike, and help you guide those decisions when you get to the impact fee and tax revenue discussions. But ultimately, that will be after we've kind of figured out what's on the list and given things some scores of what's most critical for infrastructure, for capacity, for spending. So, but ultimately, you will get a recommendation from the staff, you'll get a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and you'll have all of the raw data that we gathered from the community through these various processes.
This is not something that is going to be brought before the council in another month. It has some work to do from this point.
Yes.
Before it comes
And
back.
part of it is going to depend on how responsive we're going to need Rob van der Zanden to give us some estimates for what will that Blacktail connection, what would that really cost? And are we going to have to acquire right-of-way? Because if we're going to have to move fences and acquire, 2 strips of 2-foot strips on either side, we need to figure out what the value of that is and include it in the valuation. That's the kind of stuff that Rob's going to have to help us with, whether we can do that internally. If Rob can't get to that for 3 months, you may not hear from us. We'll be doing other stuff.
Mr. Boyce?
I was just going to say, even when we set up the prioritization, there are going to be some projects that are opportunistic. If we have a developer coming in, developing a piece of property, and we have this on the list, it might make sense to, enforce that with the developer and make that road happen, or at least make sure the right-of-way is there. And there may be some, right, like we have the port working on their projects. It might make sense, even though something might be a number 3, to take advantage of some grant funds and partner with another entity to make that happen. So even though we have a 1, 2, and 3, it might not happen that way going down the road.
There's also a way to leverage our funds. So in other words, like in the case of Ajo, V is a connection that Ajo could be interested in helping us complete. And if we had, say, water and sewer funds available to install water and sewer lines in that road, they might be willing to spend their money on traffic improvements, since we have the opportunity to install pipe or, do some horse trading, we might be able to get stuff, even though it's not fully funded by the city and the transportation program. It presents us with opportunities.
I think K would be an important one as well.
Yes. Absolutely. Mr. Chapman?
Travis or Trace can answer this. Now, we're visiting, looking at this. This is not like a comprehensive plan. We visit this and we shut our silver bullet for the year. We can revisit and change this throughout the year and stuff. Like, we're not handcuffed like a comprehensive plan.
That's correct. So the comprehensive plan is a little different than the TIP. So the transportation improvement plan, we can amend it. We can actually amend it in-house as many times as we want. And then what happens is you go for these dollars, then you actually send it to the state and ask them to adopt it to be able to get the dollars. So that's kind of how it works. So, and one of the things Jen talked about is, we're talking about one of the developments for the port, and she's going for grant dollars, and her grant dollars in combination with our grant dollars put together will help maybe take one of those roads halfway down. So, it might be, that's why we kind of put them alphabetically, even though it's kind of hard to say which one are we going to prioritize. Well, it depends on who's going to develop and when they're going to develop, and what funds they have available to them and what funds we have available to us, that we can work together as a team for the benefit of the community. So it makes more sense to just get it on the plan, and if somebody wants to develop a property, like, hey, we want to do this, and we all work on it together.
Further questions or comments from council for Mr. Goddard or Ms.
I just
Coleman?
have one quick
Mr. Plaza?
question. And I understand this is all theoretical at this point, but you said in order for us to obtain some of the funds we need for, grants for the off-ramps or the overpasses or whatever, we have to come up with this plan with all the roads that may be built in the future. Are all the roads that we have laid out here, is it all on city-owned property, or does it run through any privately owned property?
It runs through private property.
So what's the theory, I guess, for getting permission to run a road through somebody's private property?
So I think the best example of that would be B. Young RV. And the argument I made with B. Young RV in that is they had no plan for that road to come through. And I had said, as people are going on Atlantic to get on the highway, by the time they get in front of your RVs, they are going to be going 40, 45, 50 miles an hour, and they're looking to breeze through that intersection and get on the highway. If you insert a road there, all of a sudden there's going to be turning movements, people are going to have to slow down, they're going to see your stuff, plus you now have a corner, which means anybody who comes up is going to have to stop right there and look. They're going to be looking at your stuff all day long every time they use your property. All of a sudden, it's a different kind of philosophy that he totally understands it, and if he can divert some of the trips away from 21 past his business, it's an improvement for him, and it solves some of our problems at 21 because it gives people an additional option. All of a sudden, he's like, hey, slow people down, get more pass-by trips. All of a sudden, that's the kind of philosophy that I like to use as, why is this good for you and your business? The example along the railroad tracks is if you have access to the railroad, it's a financial benefit. And if you put a road through the middle of your property, now you have two properties with frontage instead of just the one along whatever road currently exists. I had a conversation with Columbia River Carbonate's Brady Whale from CRC, and it had never occurred to him that he could have more frontage by reinventing where the roads go, and now all of a sudden the back part of his property, which really was kind of, future storage, all of a sudden now it has value for him. I'll have to build a street, but now my backyard is uber valuable compared to didn't have a plan for using it before, so
the plan is to get these people to voluntarily come on board with the road?
Yes.
And it's not something that we need to worry about, down the road of having to use city funds in order to purchase property?
There is a possibility that we are going to have to use funds to acquire. Part of it is going to depend upon partnerships and, the port, for example, if they get 90% of the way and there's an extra 200 feet that they just need to get, the city or the port may at some point have to resort to eminent domain or just outright offer somebody some cash that they weren't necessarily thinking that they wanted at this point. So I can't guarantee you that won't happen, but not everybody's ready to develop when I get excited
Oh, no,
about
I
them.
understand that,
So,
Eminent domain's a dirty word.
Can you address, let's see which one, Q, I think it was Q that Ms. Thoney brought up. So we had someone that stepped forward and support the plan, but there was one particular road that's on there that brought up some concerns. How will those be mitigated and how will those be addressed?
sure. The reason why we have O, P, Q, R, and J, those are a lot of roads, but but there's only so many of them because theoretically we have to be prepared for what comes down. Ideally, Sherman to me, it seems like a logical way to go because so much of Sherman is currently constructed. It has a lot of high-quality road construction already done, has a lot of traffic, and if you could extend that without any major turning movements, you could get down all of a sudden to the south end of town without having to take some 90-degree turns. It seems logical to me. But on the other hand, there may be property owners in the way who have houses and they're not going to sell for 20 years. And we currently have the port talking about a potential extension of Howard, which would turn into J. Whether or not it goes farther than that, I don't know, because if we have trucks coming up from the north, dumping them into Howard may not make the most sense. So I start to see problems as I look through different ones. Now, P, it's way over to the west, and it doesn't help any of the property owners who are currently in the city boundaries. So it's not a great option, but it may be the one that is the easiest to get somebody to buy off on. Q is just kind of a holding place because to connect Sherman to Pekin makes sense. I just have no idea what route it would take. So at this point, it's just a wild, options, and ideally if R ends up being the choice, we might be able to eliminate Q and O and J because R does everything that those other three at. Why build 4 when you can build 1?
Gotcha. Okay. And that, I'm assuming, will come through during the public process, comment process. Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Plaza? No. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Goddard or for the tip? Okay, it's 7:23. And we are out of workshop. The chair will accept a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn?
Seconded.
Motion by Councilmember Emmer, second by Councilmember Rounds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's 8:23. Thank you, everybody.
You were just testing, right?
Yeah. Make a motion to continue all night long. As soon as